$5.7 billion. Years of engineering. A system designed to stop nuclear missiles from ending civilization. And then, almost as soon as it became operational, it was finished. Not destroyed in a war, not defeated by an enemy, not slowly dismantled after decades of service, just switched off. How does something this massive, this expensive, and this permanent-looking become obsolete almost overnight? The system was called the Stanley R. Michelson Safeguard Complex, a sprawling Cold War installation built into the flat plains of North Dakota, centered around one of the strangest military structures ever built on American soil, a massive concrete pyramid. It looked less like a radar station and more like a monument left behind by some future civilization. But it was not a monument. It was a weapon system. Its purpose was simple to describe and almost impossible to achieve. Detect incoming Soviet nuclear missiles, track them through the sky, and destroy them before they could reach their targets. This was not one of many. It was the only anti-ballistic missile complex ever made fully operational in the United States. And that is what makes what happened next so difficult to understand. Because after years of construction, after billions of dollars, after the missiles were installed and the radars were brought online, Safeguard was placed into operational status. Then, almost immediately, the decision was made to shut it down. The pyramid was built to defend America from nuclear attack. Instead, it became one of the most expensive military systems ever abandoned. Construction began in 1970. The plan was enormous from the start. There would be a central missile site, a massive missile site radar, a separate long-range perimeter acquisition radar, remote launch sites spread across the landscape, underground command spaces, missile fields, support buildings, power systems, water systems, roads, security zones. This was not an experiment sitting in a lab. This was a fully realized nuclear defense machine, and the firepower matched the scale. Safeguard was designed around two layers of defense. The first layer used Spartan missiles, long-range interceptors meant to engage incoming warheads far above the atmosphere. The second layer used sprint missiles, short-range interceptors designed for the final seconds, when anything that survived the first layer was already closing in. One system for the edge of space, another for the last moment before impact. Together, they formed a shield around America's land-based nuclear missile fields. That detail matters. Safeguard was not designed to protect every American city. It was not a giant national force field. Its main purpose was to protect the Minuteman missile silos, the weapons America would need to launch a nuclear response. In the cold logic of deterrence, that made sense. If the enemy believed America's missiles could survive a first strike, then launching that first strike became less tempting. Safeguard was not just a defense system. It was part of the psychology of nuclear war. But the psychology of nuclear war was changing faster than the concrete could cure. By the time the complex was finished, the United States and the Soviet Union had already signed the anti-ballistic missile treaty. The treaty limited how many missile defense sites each side could deploy. The reason was brutal but logical. If one side built a large shield, the other side might build more missiles to overwhelm it. Defense could become escalation. A shield could make the arms race worse, so the very kind of system Safeguard represented, massive, permanent, expensive missile defense, was already being restricted by diplomacy. That is the contradiction at the center of this place. America built a shield for a world that was already negotiating shields away, and still, the construction continued. The pyramid rose out of the prairie. The radar faces were installed into its sloped concrete walls. The missile silos were prepared, the command systems were brought online, the site became operational, and then the political reality caught up with it. Congress looked at the cost, strategists looked at the treaty limits, critics looked at the changing nuclear balance, and suddenly the question was no longer whether Safeguard could work. The question was whether it made sense to keep it alive. That question became impossible to avoid. The system had cost billions. It required a huge support infrastructure. It protected missile fields, not cities. It was constrained by treaty, and it existed in a world where one side could always build more warheads, more decoys, and more ways to overwhelm the shield. In theory, Safeguard represented security. In practice, it represented a terrifying problem. How much money do you spend protecting weapons that exist only because civilization might end? The answer came quickly. Safeguard was shut down as an active missile defense system less than a year after becoming fully operational. The missiles went quiet, the crews stood down, the launch sites began to empty. A system built to intercept the end of the world never fired a shot. No great battle, no dramatic failure, no final launch, just silence. But the structure did not vanish. That is part of what makes the story so strange. The pyramid remained, the launch sites remained, the concrete remained. The geometry of the Cold War was still sitting there in the open, as if the future had arrived, failed, and then been abandoned in place. And nearby, part of the original radar mission survived in another form. The separate perimeter acquisition radar was transferred into a continuing warning and space tracking role. So the missile shield died, but the act of watching the sky continued. That is the afterlife of Safeguard. The weapon disappeared. The surveillance remained. Over time, pieces of the complex passed into different hands. Some areas were sealed, some were reused, some became ruins. One of the former launch sites eventually became accessible to the public. A place built for nuclear war became a place people could visit. Families could walk through spaces once connected to missiles designed to destroy incoming warheads in the sky. That transformation is almost impossible to process. The same concrete, the same blast doors, the same underground geometry. But now the visitors are not soldiers preparing for the unthinkable. They are tourists, historians, photographers, and people trying to understand how the Cold War could produce something so strange. And the pyramid itself still has power as an image. It rises out of the flat land like something that should not be there. Clean lines, sloped walls, a brutal, almost sacred shape. From a distance, it looks like architecture, but it was never designed to be admired. Every angle, every radar face, every hardened wall served one purpose: to detect nuclear warheads and help destroy them before they reached the ground. The beauty of it is almost an accident. That is what makes Safeguard so haunting. It was not a fantasy weapon. It was not a conspiracy. It was real. It was built. It was armed. It became operational. And then the strategic world moved on without it. The system did not fail because the engineers were incompetent. It failed because nuclear strategy was bigger than engineering. A radar can track a target. A missile can intercept a threat. A bunker can survive pressure, blast, and time. But no machine can solve the political logic of mutual destruction. Safeguard was built to answer one question: can we stop incoming nuclear missiles? But the question that killed it was different. Even if we can build this, should we? For $5.7 billion, America built a shield against the end of the world. Then it decided the shield itself no longer made sense, and that is why the pyramid still matters. Not because it hides a secret, not because it fired in anger, not because it changed the course of history, but because it shows the moment when the Cold War reached a strange kind of limit. A nation built a machine to survive nuclear war, then looked at the machine, looked at the cost, looked at the treaty, looked at the strategy, and walked away. Today, the missiles are gone, the silos are empty, the crews are gone. The system that was meant to defend America's nuclear arsenal exists mostly as concrete, memory, and unanswered questions. But the pyramid still stands, a silent shape on the plains, a monument to fear, a monument to engineering, a monument to the moment America built one of the most advanced missile defense systems on Earth, and then switched it off. Some weapons are abandoned because they fail. Safeguard is more unsettling than that. It was abandoned because it arrived too late for the world it was built to defend. Subscribe for more declassified stories from the forgotten machinery of history. This was Redacted Briefing.